Hello, and welcome to another episode of What Would You Do? Today's episode is going to cover the issue of respect life, specifically concerning the death penalty. Our team has created a staged court case in which I, Sabrina Valdivia, will be acting as a fellow citizen who has committed a high-degree murder and is being placed on trial to determine whether or not I should be placed on death row. We have carefully selected a jury to present at the staged court case based on varying genders, race, and religion. The first member of our jury, Angelina Savarese, is a white female atheist. The second member of our jury, Ali Wilbur, is a white female Catholic. Through the episode, we will get to examine how different individuals, specifically in regards to religion, view the morality of the death penalty. Let's take a look at how the scenario progressed and its outcomes.
We are present here today to determine the guilt of citizen Sabrina Valdivia in her alleged high-degree murder of another human being. Prosecuting attorney, you may speak first.
I believe that Sabrina is guilty in the charge of first-degree murder and should be faced with the death penalty.
Defense attorney, you may present your case next.
I believe that the defendant is innocent of the charge of murder in the first degree, and therefore should be spared the death penalty.
Now, the jury may convene in a separate room to discuss the statements and facts presented and determine the verdict.
My opinion of this case is that the defendant is guilty and should be faced with the charge of first-degree murder and to be convicted of the death penalty. The facts presented all line up and prove Sabrina's guilt. Because of the malice presented in this murder, she should face the repercussions and be eliminated from this earth. After committing the crime with the severity she did, she does not deserve to be alive and walk amongst other human beings on this planet.
Gina, speaking to your point, although the facts may be convincing to some, it is important to recognize that despite the truth regarding the execution of this crime, it is not in our authority to take another human being's life. The Catholic perspective is against the thought of taking another person's life for their wrongdoing. As Pope John Paul II said, the new evangelization calls for followers of Christ who are unconditionally pro-life, who will proclaim, celebrate, and serve the gospel of life in every situation. A sign of hope is the increasing recognition that the dignity of human life must never be taken away, even in the case of someone who has done great evil. I renew the appeal I made for consensus to end death penalty, which is both cruel and unnecessary. Based on Pope John II's quote, I believe that defendant should not be placed on death row.
Ali, unfortunately, I do not agree. Your facts presented to back up your verdict are not convincing. Pope John Paul II has no relevance to me, and a simple quote from him isn't going to change my personal views.
Well, to expand on my previous point and further convince you, principles of Catholic social teaching can be applied to the situation. The first that I wish to talk about is human dignity. The Catholic Church teaches that human life is sacred and that everyone's life has value. This relates to the death penalty because it is going against the teachings that tell us to value human life. Capital punishment allows people to take another human's life as punishment, which goes against the Church's teaching. The next principle to look at is stewardship of creation. This teaching tells us to show respect for the Creator by respecting His creations. We are taught to protect other people and our planet, but the capital punishment goes against this. We are not protecting God's creation by using the death penalty.
That may be the Catholic perspective, but I, as an atheist, believe otherwise.
Even as an atheist, morality still exists. This case is an issue of that morality. Virtues and vices can be applied towards all human beings everywhere, regardless of their gender, race, or religion. Let's first look at the virtues of the death penalty. The first virtue I'm going to focus on is charity. Charity is the virtue of love. This virtue tells us to love our neighbors as ourselves for the love of God. It tells us to love everyone, even our enemies. This applies to the death penalty because even though the person committed a big crime, we should still show them the love of God and show mercy. The second virtue I'm going to talk about is prudence. Prudence is the virtue that helps us make moral decisions. It allows us to take moral principles and apply them to real-life situations. This virtue applies to the death penalty because it allows you to make the decision of whether or not the death penalty is acceptable based on your morals. The third and final virtue I'm going to mention is justice. Justice is the virtue that relates our relationship with others and our community. This virtue relates to the death penalty because it helps us respect the rights of all other humans and allows us to make the right decision. Now to look at the vice, wrath. Wrath is the vice of anger. This vice applies to the death penalty because the decision to allow this punishment can be influenced by the vice of anger. Based on all of these moral principles, your religion does not change the morality of sentencing Sabrina to death.
Putting all that you said together, your argument is more convincing now. I recognize the Catholic perspective on the issue, but now also see how this can be applied to all people, even non-Catholics. I see that the moral object of taking a human being's life is wrong, despite the intention of eliminating someone who poses a threat to society. Even though the circumstances are extreme, considering Sabrina murdered an innocent human being, I realize now that despite this, it still is not moral to kill, just as Sabrina has killed. Although I still believe the defendant is guilty, I now believe that she would be sentenced to life in prison rather than sentenced to death.
I agree with your verdict.
So we've come to a final decision?
We have.
Awesome.
Now that the jury has reached a verdict in the case of the people versus Sabrina Valdivia, I ask jury member Angelina Savarese to step forward with the jury's verdict.
We have come to the decision that the defendant is guilty. However, we have determined that the immorality of sentencing her to death and taking her life. Instead, we believe that she should be sentenced to life in prison.
Based on the jury's verdict, defendant Sabrina Valdivia is found guilty of murder in the first degree and is sentenced to life in prison. Case is closed.